Christine, let me ask you, like, did you have any trepidations with the fact that Brandon Lee died senselessly making the original for them to make it again?
Well,
or actually, I'll even go further on that. Did either of you have any problem with the sequels that came out before the remake?
yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing with me is, again, I was very young when I saw it on TV, and we didn't really exactly grow up with the internet when we were younger. I didn't really delve into the internet that much until I was in middle school. So I just accepted The Crow for what it is. And it was just like one of those movies, I would say, that was up there. Again, just discovering it. So it wasn't until I think I was actually in maybe my freshman year of high school that I just kind of looked it up on IMDb and was like, Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee. I was never a fan of Bruce Lee, so I never knew. And it's like, what the fuck? Because I knew, again, a little bit about how Bruce Lee died and all of kind of what he was about. But again, I wasn't a fan. Then I learned that just via the internet. I was like, shit. Wow. Because I never saw Brandon Lee in anything other than The Crow.
Right.
And it's like, that's so sad.
Yep.
But I'm glad with, you know, the situation being what it was that they got to finish the film. But also, it's so amazing how, like, you know, once you have information, you can never look back the same way on it again.
Yeah.
Which is weird for me that I went so many years seeing The Crow 1994 just for how I viewed it. And then all of a sudden I have this knowledge about Brandon Lee, and it's like, oh, wow. That just adds new meaning onto it. But again, like, even with that knowledge, I wasn't about like, oh, these Crow sequels shouldn't have happened. First of all, the second Crow sequel was very, very heavily edited in a bad way. I would love to see the director's cut of that.
Hot take here.
Yeah.
I actually don't mind City of Angels. Now, here's the thing.
It's heavily edited. I want to see the director's cut.
It has grown on me over time. When it first came out and I saw it, I was like, this is garbage. But I think that it's a different style of, I want to say it's like a time capsule of alternative punk culture at that time period.
I mean, wasn't the first movie too with like the whole?
It was,
like,
but it was
goth
like
and grunge scene?
Columbine-esque.
Yeah, but it was like 94, early 90s punk culture. Like, that's what that one was.
I mean, City of Angels was before Columbine too.
Right.
You know.
Yeah,
But that
It was
kind of
before the Yellow Ranger died.
Yeah.
The Yellow Ranger was in the second one.
No, but how is it okay to make a sequel and character?
because there's no Eric Draven in it.
So if they had done this remake,
You know,
but
Eric
not called
Draven in the
Eric
comic
Draven.
is very heavily different than the
I
Eric Draven in the
understand
movie,
that. I
right?
understand.
And he's heavily different than the Eric Draven we saw in 2024.
Correct. But
They're all different.
But what I'm saying is this. When that actor has been so synonymous with that character and died
More
making
that
them,
tragedy than the character.
I'm going to keep
more the
going on
tragedy
it.
than the
I'm going to keep
character.
going on it because this is the truth. This is why people were so pissed off about it. Okay? They believe that, Eric Draven is Brandon Lee. And for all intents and purposes, I think he knocked out of the park with that first film. But I don't
agree.
think
I thought he was over the top.
Okay, fine, fair enough. But what I'm saying is that when you have someone else play a different character who's not Eric Draven, I think it's more palatable, and I think that's why they made all the sequels to it.
But it's 30 years after Brandon Lee. This is the first Eric Draven.
Well,
The second movie his character was named Ash.
Yeah,
I don't know about the third movie. I saw it.
There was
but-
no Eric Draven in any of the other ones.
Okay, then what's the problem? Eric Draven was in the TV show, which I didn't see, but it's like, what's the problem with that?
Let me,
TV show was
Let me
garbage.
ask you guys this: is it unfair to put Brandon Lee's legacy on his death
Yes.
more than anything?
Yes.
I don't think it's because it also goes back
Absolutely.
to his father, and and his father died making a movie, and I think that we want to create some kind of mythic kind of aura around tragedy because we don't want it to just be senseless. And I think that we've maybe personified Brandon Lee too much with his
Yeah.
death on the film than him as a person, because he, like his father, had died tragically while making films.
I believe that, like, with tragedies for people who meet like tragic fates, like, I don't want to think about how they died. I want to think about how they lived. And I didn't know anything about Brandon Lee, which is why I clicked on him, like, when I was, again, a freshman in high school, I believe. And again, it's like, it's a shame that he only did that and maybe one or two other things prior to that.
He
But,
had done a lot
you
before
know,
that. He had barely done a lot
it's
of, like,
amazing in
big
his
box
short
films.
life what he did do. And that's the kind of the same, like, where I think you brought up Heath Ledger. It's like what he could have been.
True,
You know?
but I'm gonna counter.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna counter.
Allow him to volley.
Allow me
sir.
to volley. Okay, so here's the thing. And this is where the cynical side of me comes in. The remake wasn't made for altruistic purposes. It was not made to satisfy you, the fan, who is a fan of the comic book. It was not made for that. It was made for money. It was made for, how can I cash in on a fan base? Because that is the methodology. That is what Hollywood is thinking of. How can I cash in on the fan base? They're not thinking of, how can I make a new version of this that builds up off the old one? How can I be artistic? Bullshit. And you know how I know that? Because I saw the 2024 version. That's how I know. If I watch that movie and, like, they hit me with, like, hey, yeah, here's a version of Brandon Lee, not Brandon Lee, excuse me, Eric Draven. There you go. There you go.
Boy.
That is
There's the problem.
more tied to the comic book, and maybe a version that takes place in 1980s, which I think would be the smart move, is to make it take place in the 80s. But that's not what we got.